What's up, guys? Carmen here with Pittsburgh White Schwartz coming at you again with something slightly different for our deck profile slot this week. Instead of doing a more straightforward deck profile where we just go over the cards and I sort of run through everything and we have a bunch of people come in, we all talk about it, we all throw opinions out about it, sort of have a more freeform discussion. I wanted to have a more directed discussion that's mostly about the brewing process, and for that I'm going to use Dal Segno with the new Circus 20th stuff. I've had this deck for a bit. I picked it up in Japan more as a fun deck, and I had a bunch of spares and stuff for the set. And then when Circus came out and some of these cards started to be kind of interesting, started to get the gears turning, tried to put through some stuff in the spoiler season and things like that, and just sort of now we're like 2-3 weeks after release, getting to that point. And I've finally nailed down something that I'm comfortable sharing. It's not even completely done yet, but just sort of going through my process, sort of from beginning to end, what I started with, and sort of showing you guys how I sort of move through the deck building process with a brand new set. And maybe that can help you guys when new things come out and stuff like that, and you don't have resources, and you want to try to brew something with like no shell or stuff like that, or you're someone who mostly plays English, you don't want to look at the Japanese stuff, you want to start completely fresh and go from there. And I hope this is like a good resource for you guys. And if you like it, let us know. And we'll do more with all our guys. And Andy, of course, loves brewing stuff. Brian as well. They have their own processes that'll differ from mine. This one's going to be a little longer than our normal deck profiles, obviously. However, I'm not going to try to linger too long. And at the end of it, it'll probably come out about the exact same length as our normal one. So let's just jump right into it here. So, basically, what we're going to do, I called it a deep dive, which is sort of a riff off of more in-depth deck profiles that have been done by community members in the past, and they've been really helpful to me and sort of had that sort of deeper, more meaningful discussion about like why you're running certain things, why you aren't running other things, which is going to be a big part of this as well. But even more than that, this is like I said earlier, an exercise in approaching a new set. So a big thing that people don't realize, especially, I think this is more common with English players because they sort of have an idea of what is coming. Whereas even before everything is out for a set, you can actually start working on the build, especially if it's a second set or something like that. So Circus 20th, obviously, Dal Segno, a part of Da Capo, part of the whole Neo Standard umbrella. However, it's trait locked, and we'll get into that later. But there were still cards that were released, and I even started thinking, even from the first card, okay, how are we going to build around this new shell? What can we abuse? What can we use? Things like that. So you can actually start working, you can start brewing, even before stuff comes out. And for that, you can also use proxies to play test, and you can even use TTS, which are really good resources just to do basic smoke testing, because you don't know the whole set, so you can't truly sit down and do real brews with like how you're going to play into things, but you're just smoke testing stuff, your smoke testing effects. Just so that you have a better base before the set comes out. And at this point, it's really okay to just build around single things just to sort of test how strong they are. And I'll get into that when we get to the actual card that like got me to like start building, because that's sort of where I started with this set. Normally, that can kind of cloud your judgment because you won't think of everything because you don't have the whole set. But for now, since we don't have all the cards anyway, it's fine to sort of take that more laser focused kind of blinders on approach just to test stuff just while spoiler season is happening for whatever set. And if it's a second set like Circus 20th, you also have to look backwards. So I didn't have all the cards and stuff for Dal Segno, so I had to start digging and be like, okay, this is what I need to pick up, this is what I should grab, this is everything that's relevant, things like that. Start grabbing profiles that you think might have potential, right? They're profiles that have potential, cards that might not have been able to see play previously, but with some more modern profiles and some more additional tools, maybe that specific effect is something that makes or breaks an entire build. So make sure you go back and you're also looking at the old stuff if it's a second set. Obviously, for a new set, you don't have that, so you can only focus on the new. And then once you have all that done, you just, once the set is out, or everything is already spoiled and you know everything, fortunately for me, for Dal Segno, that happened pretty early, or earlier than the rest of the set for Da Capo. We knew all the cards in Dal Segno, and then I was able to go from there. But the second you know all the cards, then you can actually start like critically breaking things down, thinking about everything, and sort of building something from the ground up with full knowledge of that. So let's get into Dal Segno specifically. So why exactly did I decide to work on Dal Segno are not like Anniversary. Well, I heard Memory was pretty good, so we're gonna go over now. It's not actually Memory. It's not actually Memory. That's not what brought me into Dal Segno. It's actually this card, this 3/2 Himari finisher. This card is absolutely insane. It is on play heal and then on attack climax combo. If you have a full board of either Anniversary or Kazanashima or Kazana Island characters, you pay 1, and if you do, it gets cancel burn 2. So if they cancel, they burn 2. However, that's not where it stops. It rolls to another character for free. So what I mean by that is the effect triggers, your opponent cancels, they burn 2, and then another character gets that cancel burn 2 and the roll to the next character. So this is the same exact damage output as Kalruko if they cancel all 3 main attacks. So it'll go, first one's burn 2, second one's burn 2, burn 2, third one is burn 2, burn 2, burn 2. So you just get it rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling. But the most important part here is that it's on attack. It's on attack pay 1. So you only have to have 7 stock to do this from nothing. And you have to be able to fill your board. But that's pretty achievable. There's also this other cool card in the set. This just gives hand on court a front. So, and this is a healer. So basically, my idea was seeing this initial reveal of cards is what we can do is we can take this, we can play a more aggressive, very lean, and still have some memory cards in the deck to be able to effectively 2-turn our opponent even when we're behind. Where if this card doesn't get there, or maybe unfortunately, like the damage cancels on the first one, which is the fail case that everyone was talking about when this card first got revealed. Even if that happens, as long as you have 2 hand, you just ditch, clock, do whatever you can, try to cantrip into another climax, whatever you can do to recur this and do it again. And just keep threatening it again and again and again until your opponent dies. So it's a very aggressive strategy, sort of leveraging how stupid a hand-on-court support can be. So it was these 2 cards, this sort of package here, combined with the fact that it's also on choice, which helps you in a more aggressive deck make sure that you're keeping up resources, whether they be stock or hand, whatever you need at that point, means that I felt that just sort of, even after only seeing these, that there was something there, something that needed to be explored that wasn't the Capo deck, it wasn't the good stuff deck, and it wasn't the just mono Anniversary deck that only relies off the Anniversary trait. There was something that could be done with just the Kazanashima, just Dal Segno stuff. So yeah, this is sort of where I started. This is my build around. This is where all of my sort of pre-release testing began, was around this card and how we could best build a deck that got us to this point. Because that's the thing with Dal Segno, is it's not the finisher that's the problem now. It's getting there. And I'll talk about that extensively later. But so goals and challenges, when you're like sitting down to actually brew a deck, you got to decide exactly what you want to do. So for Dal Segno, the big thing, number one, what we want to do, we want to generate memory as quickly as possible because we're going to be a bit more aggressive than your general deck, probably even more aggressive than most people would consider Saikano. How Saikano is aggressively, they're always like looping Kato, they're like slamming a lot of climaxes, so people think of that as aggressive. However, like when I think of a deck as aggressive, I think it's like I'm very forced to go under a lot of the time, so we have these characters with on reverse go to memory effects, on reverse coin flip to go to memory effects, and we're just doing that, so we're kind of chumping sometimes, we're kind of just, sandbagging a lot of the time. However, because we're generating memories, those cards are compression neutral, so we're not actually ruining our compression by going under as long as we're getting rid of them and as long as we can keep up enough stock to do our finisher. So that was sort of our like key goal, because we need that base to get us to the hat finisher, the Himari finisher. And that's the other part. We want to be able to make sure that we can filter and sculpt for at least 2+ hat finishing boards. So 2 hats and 1 other lane in at least 90% of our games. This is why you can't exactly have true guarantees, but we want to get like as close as we can. We want to just ensure that we can do a 2+ board, because triple is like obviously the nut, but like you're not going to get there every time. But we want to make sure that in all of our games, pretty much 90, 95, 100% of our games, if possible, 2+ hat finishers on board with the ability to swing with the hat first. So 5 stock, 2 cards in hand, and a climax. We want to make sure we hit that every game. The other thing that we have to solve to get to that point, as well as, generating our memory base, making sure that we're not super punished for sandbagging later, especially if we're abusing the hand on core support, is we need to find some sort of solution to Dal Segno's absolutely atrocious mid-game. I'll get into that when we talk about level 1 combos. I don't want to spend too much time on it here. And then what we also have to do is we have to make sure that we're doing something meaningful at every level that sort of gets to that game plan. We can't just be sandbagging for memory all throughout the game. We're going to do that sort of incidentally in our third lanes and things like that, and we don't have better things to do. But we need to do something meaningful. We can't just completely sandbag until we get to our hat turn. Although, after you look at the deck, you might think that's sort of what ends up happening. However, we want to try to do something meaningful at every level. When you're setting out to build a deck from scratch, especially in a new set, when you don't even have second sets to go off of, make sure your deck is doing something actually meaningful to its strategy, your main goal, at every single level as you're brewing. So getting into some actual cards, we're going to start at the base. We're going to start at our level 0. We're going to start looking at field pluses. Like more aggressive, or I guess not aggressive is not the right word, but a traditional Weiss deck, we're going to look at our level 0 field pluses to sort of give us that kind of base. We're a deck that really wants to attack as many times each turn as we can. Again, like any deck, but especially at level 0. We're not a deck that's sort of trying to elongate the level 0 game. So anything that can give us that turn 0, like that going first plus, is going to be great for us. So a couple options here. We have the Himari, which is a center runner as well as a spawner. So on attack, middle top, if it's a level 0, it goes to the back row. So that's sort of 2 chances to plus. Sort of in the same vein here, we have this other Himari, which is a booster box topper promo, which is a level 1, 3500 power if it is completely alone, so really only on turn 0. And when it gets reversed, you reveal top. If it's level 2 or higher, you rest it. So that's also 2 chances to plus, 1 with power and 1 with sort of that coin flip effect. We have a traditional 4K if you have 2 or less stock. We have this other Nori that is kind of a weird card. It gives your other character, if you have 1 or less other characters, 1500 power. So it can make our 2500 power EO beater that I'll talk about in a bit sit at 4K. And then it can also maybe coin flip to give us some stock if our opponent cancels. It goes to stock if your opponent cancels this card specific attack. And then we also have this Ame that's just a straight 4K. It gives your opponent hand on core, I believe. In it might be the lane of Craftsman, it might be the full field. I can't particularly remember. Blue isn't a color that we struggle to fix, and it's because we have color fixing problems that we're going to choose a yellow one. So when I was first sitting down to brew Dal Segno, especially as we're talking about the new Circus stuff, I really didn't think that Dal Segno would still be playing this card. So this card is basically just sort of your only real option beforehand in terms of like a usable plussing 0, unless you're going to try to play the 4K Ame. But if you need to play yellow to play stuff like the old combo package, this card was better. It did technically have 2 chances to plus you, 1 by running to center and 1 by milling card. However, the thing that puts this specific one over the edge in our deck is that all of these cards that you see here, this Ame, which is an on reverse, pay 1, ditch a card, send this to memory, drop search. The EO, it's 2500 power, on reverse, reveal top, as long as it is a Kazanashima character, if she goes to memory for free. This Hazuki, which I'll get into, it's a really important card, it's an on-play clock filter, and then pay 1, send this to memory, top check 4, add a Kazanashima character, as well as the Nori that I talked about before that can give extra power and go to stock. None of these cards have come and play effects that are truly meaningful other than the Hazuki, and that's not the main reason that we're playing Hazuki. So because we don't have these cards that have come and play effects, they are either when they become reversed, or they send themselves via an act, or they do something, or they give one of our other characters power, that spawner effect becomes a lot more valuable. So, and especially because of the way Dal Segno has always worked out and has continued to work out afterwards, is you're going to have a lot of level 0s because their best cards are, other than the hat finisher, at level 0. So because of that, and this has 2 chances to plus, and we really need that turn 0 plus, this was the card that I found to work best after a lot of testing. This was the field plus. If we were going to play a field plus, we would play this one. One other quick note is that if you are opting to play the new Ame 2 one, and again, I'll get into that, you have a higher chance to coin flip for the other Himari's other effect, and I think that's fine. But like I said, the big thing, fixing for yellow is a massive pain. You end up having to splash weird level 1 if you don't play this, and then I'm going to get into the Rickies in a second. They don't really like work with fixing for color, and like one of the other yellow cards that I found was good. It's like a Top Check 2 rearranged. That was like a card that I wanted to play, therefore I didn't want to clock it later on in the game. So a field plus like this that sort of loses value later is exactly what we need to make sure that we color fix ourselves for yellow without playing too many yellow cards that we don't want to. So we can only play like 7, 8, or 9, and we can make sure that we get our stuff every game. So I briefly talked about Rickies. So there are actually 2 Ricky options for Dal Segno as a set. There's this Nori, which is on play mill 2. If you hit a climax, you mill your opponent's top card and then can put a card from their waiting room back on top. So you coin flip yourself and your opponent to like remove a cancel on the top of your deck, or like put it back and then like influence your plays. A lot of weird edge case play with it, but it's more relevant that it fills our grave because it is an on reverse pay 1, clock yourself, send it to memory, and then grab any Kazanashima character from your waiting room, bring it to your hand. The other one is the hat. The hat is also an on reverse, pay 1, clock yourself, send to memory Ricky. However, this only searches hat traded characters from deck. So the problem with this when we're building out the deck is there just aren't other hats that we want to grab from level 0 into level 1. We don't want to grab a 2K backup. That feels like absolute ass. That 1-0 6500 Himari, the one that reveals top, and it might be a 6500 cross turn, makes pretty much every level 1 dual color, which is like kind of black for consistency, so like whatever. And then adding the 3-2 just to clock it also just felt absolutely bad. I played everywhere from 3 Rickies all the way up to 7 or 8 Rickies trying to play both of these cards, and playing more than 4 of them always felt like I was having not enough stock, because we'll get into the level 1 that creates a big problem, even though I was keeping up hand. So we decided we're just going to run the Nori, and similarly to Saikono, funnily enough, you'll see in Saikono list they don't typically run 4 of the Uta Riki, which is a similar profile, 1500 power. It doesn't have the first effect, but it does the same thing, grabs anything traded from waiting room. Decided that we're actually only going to play 3 in most lists, because we can really only resolve 1, maybe 2 if we have a really long extended level 0. So that sort of opens up deck slots for other characters at level 1 and things like that. Just something that I found in testing, especially when they're memory Ricky and things like that. Their use sort of goes down exponentially from level 0 to like your first level 1 turn. Everything past that, they become pretty useless. So deciding to go for the Nori Ricky instead of the hat, primarily for targets, but also some of the other stuff. Also notably, one of our only ways to salvage, because the rest of these tools either rip cards from the top of our deck or are straight up drop searches. So hand fixes and sculpting tools, these are really important if we're going to try to make sure that we're going to play our hats and stuff every game. Just really important effects like that. I already talked about the Hazuki, the clock filter, the top check 4 add, go to memory. And then there's also the Ame drop search. I also already talked about that. There's also this Himari on play drop search that also has an effect where you can, I believe it is, pitch a card, bounce a cost 0 character your opponent's hand. Pretty edge case. We don't really want to direct attack. We want to make sure that we leave reverses for our sometimes very dinky advantage combos if we get the opportunity to get them off. And I never found the need to really truly have a main phase drop search, but it is an option in yellow. I'll talk about this EO more in a second, but I want to talk about this Ame at the end here first. This Ame is a ditch bond to a event that unfortunately we are not able to fit in the deck, called Paradise System. There are 3 different kinds. They all have very unique memory effects where they can pop back to hand and do a lot of crazy stuff depending on if you take certain amounts of damage where they're not canceled. But unfortunately, those can't see a place in this specific kind of list. I hope to sort of brew with the Paradise System engine and more of that stuff later, but that was not my goal with this build, so unfortunately we can't play that. However, this EO is actually one of the strongest hand filtering cards, as it turned out. I remember reading this card, and this is why it's important to smoke test in the pre-release phase. Because I read this card, and it sounds kind of unassuming at first. It's on play, mill 2. If you hit a climax, you can give anything, including yourself, 1500 power. Kind of whatever effect, forced mill, not great. But then the other effect is you can ditch any card from your hand to summon a level 0 from your grave. Very important for Dal Segno, a lot of grave access in the set, other than the Nori Riki, and immediately summon it to the field. That's very important, and I'll get into why in a bit. But first, let's go back to the Hazuki. This is like just like the hat. This is one of the real reasons to play only Kazanashima, only Dal Segno, not mixing a lot of the only anniversary cards and things like that. Because both of its effects only target Kazanashima, the clock filter, and the top check 4 add. However, also, or I guess in addition, the clock filter also stops us from being able to run the Anzu, which some of you may know. It's a card where when it's on the top of your clock, it's an alarm effect. At the end of your turn, it's healed. So basically, it's a free clock. It's a free extra card every turn. And a lot of decks will run that as sort of like just a way to constantly generate some sort of additional hand. Since it is just a free clock, as a reason it's on the restriction list, it's very strong. But because we do want to use the clock filter more often than not with this card, and it's a big reason why this card is so strong, because it's a filter effect and a memory generation effect on the same card. Because that moves the clock around, since you have to clock from the top of your deck, we can't really run Anzu either. So this is one of those reasons to play Dal Segno, not playing Anniversary, things like that. Just wanted to touch on that briefly. And again, brief note, if you've ever played any memory deck, you've played Saikano, you played, New De Capo, any sort of these deck where your memory generating tools are also your filtering tools, you need to be very hyper aware of how removing filtering tools from your deck over time will affect your late game sculpting, right? You need to know when to remove the card from the game, when to banish it, and when not to. So something would be like, oh, I could drop search here, I could drop search there, but then like, oh, no, I don't have any drop searches left in my deck. Maybe I'm having a long game. Maybe I need to drop search later. You somehow resolved 3 Ames earlier, and that's why you'll see when we look at the list, why you run high counts of these cards, because they do banish themselves. You see, like, oh, do you really need 4 clock drop searchers? Do you really need 4 clock filters? Things like that. Yeah, you do, because you're slowly getting rid of them. So just something I want to note before I moved on to the EO. Again, this EO very unassuming. I talked about the effects before, but what it does, what's so important, is it helps fulfill full field conditions. And it turns unplayables into chumpers, especially when those chumpers generate you memory, like the EO 2500. This is one of the most important cards for mono Dal Segno going forward. Dal Segno, as I said before, terrible access to grave. This is one of your only ways to access grave, even if it is just level 0s. What it also lets us do is really greed our counts of cards that sit on board. So if we opt to run the Hazuki supporter, which is really popular right now in the JP meta, that can remove cards, put them in your opponent's clock, and they remove the top card, basically making it so that they don't get their own reverse effects, or our Brainstormer, cards that are going to sit on the field, it lets us keep those card counts very low so that we can dedicate more slots to memory generators, filtering tools, utility cards, things like that. So you have extremely, extremely important card of the set. I wrote this card off almost immediately after reading it, but after initial smoke testing and further brewing, this is one of the most important cards in the set, and I think that almost every Dal Segno deck that you play that's going to play any of these terrible combos, which I'll get into in just one or two slides here, is going to need this card to be able to consistently function. It is very, very important. So, getting into these level 1 combos, they are so unbelievably depressing. They all cost stock in some way. There is not a single playable, costless combo in this entire set that you can hope to play and do well with in the current metagame. We got the Noari, which is off door. We got this Hazuki, which I'll get into. It's one of the worst ones off bar. And then there's 1/1 Ame off book. This 2/1 Himari, which is an early play off wind, and this 2/1 Ame, which is brand new with Circus, which is off pants. They all have varying drawbacks and terrible things about them. The one is like the worst level in Dal Segno, and it was before, and it is now. So we're going to start off with the Nori. It is an on attack 1500 power gain, so swings in at 6k, 7 with the climax. If you have 2 or more memory, and then also on attack, you pay 1 and give this and something else on reverse salvage. So double boomerang, Gurren Lagann, if you're English player, it's exactly that kind of effect. Initially, this is like the most attractive option that I was brought to because it's off a good trigger, it's off door, it has the new bomb, which is on play, give any other character 1500 power, so it has good synergy with that. You ensure you kind of win 2 lanes. 2+ memory basically can't be whiffed, and it also doesn't have a field condition. We'll get into that when we talk about the other things. And anything did open, because you can salvage any character, it doesn't have to be on trait, opens up some spicy options just outside of being restricted to the Kazanashima trait if you wanted to run. But like I tested like the CX swapper and things like that in the set because I was running door, because I had running this combo, I could reasonably get those cards into my hand, even though they were off trait, and even though their effects didn't have anything to do with the trait. But as it turns out, getting 2 reverses between level 0 and level 1 these days, and especially in the JP meta, is becoming next to impossible. There's so many JCs, there's so many Obero style combos, Standby is putting out massive walls, Dal is giving those walls even more power. It just, even with the bomb, it became so much of a pain to pay that stock, and smart players were doing things like completely denying me the ability to do it because they knew I was so should I say, reliant on that extra plus in the mid game, that they would play only to deny me and not like execute their own strategy. And it actually hampered me so bad that this slowly became really difficult to play. If the meta does change, this is a totally fine option. The door does add a lot to the toolboxing of the list. It does let you cut down on some other counts and things like that because you are running the door. But eventually had to be dropped because of just sort of the field right now. Unless something crazy changes, it won't be the play. So this one actually is costless, this Hazuki, I did lie. However, this is not a plussing combo. This is a stock generation combo. And it on the climax play, it gives itself and another character reveal top, and it's a level 1 or higher card, which means it does count the Paradise systems. That card goes to stock. So it might be a +2 to stock on attack, which is pretty good. It also has the, if you're familiar with Contact Collection, obviously this card came first. However, more people know about the, I can't remember the card's name. It's blue, 1/0, it's Maguro, and then as long as it's rested at the beginning of your Encore phase, it changes into this 1/1 from grave. And this 1/1 is just a cross-turn 8k that can also rest 2 characters to change back into this so you can loop combo, which has some cool synergy with bar. I had high hopes with this going in, but however, the problem with any stock generation combo is the set needs to be able to do something to immediately turn that additional stock into pluses to hand, or you will just run out of cards. You can't do much in Dal Segno other than brainstorm with your stock. There are lots of crazy abilities, especially in green and with the Paradise system, that you can use that stock for. However, those effects also don't really plus you, or not in a meaningful way. They might plus you on board, or one thing here, the idea behind this combo is that you win on board instead of winning in hand. However, too many things can just answer a 1/1 8k, especially when they know it's your only strategy. Especially with Grisaya running bombs and stuff like that, this combo super feels bad. I dropped it pretty quickly after only 5 or 6 games. Was not anywhere near as good as any of the other already mediocre combos. Okay, this is what I played before Circus, and I am just never going back. This is an early play 2/1 where you have to have this 1/0 Himari. I briefly talked about it before. It's the 6500 coin flip for cross turn power. This has to be in your level, in level 1. That's a no-go. You have to sack to be able to play the game before the game even starts. You have to sack it mulligan to make sure that you have this card at level 0 to clock so that you can level it to play this down at level 1. Because if you can't play this down at level 1, you're out of cards and you're shit out of luck. So yeah, I'm not even going to talk about this anymore. This is completely unplayable. It is an on play. You just play the climax and you search for every copy of this card you have. So like that part is pretty good because you're also getting a 7k body. But the condition is just completely unmeetable. Okay, this is the new Ame. She's an early play. She's 2-1. So early play if you have 4 more characters on field. So you have to fill your whole field. And then it's on reverse, top check up to 5, add 2 Kazanashima or anniversary characters from those 5 to your hand. It has pretty good synergy with the hand on core support. You're investing in this 2-1 oversized quote unquote body that you'll be able to hand on car even if your opponent gets over it, and then it's pretty defendable. You get over the threshold right now in JP of backing up to 8k. Which everybody talks about the Kirito, the pan support, getting up to 8k as being a big deal. You want to sort of hit that threshold if you can. You only need to play 1 and get 1 reverse to get that +2. So that's a little bit more feasible than the Nori double boomerang. It also has this memory bonder. Just pay 1 on as long as this card is standing. You send it to memory, and you add this Ame from your deck to your hand, which means you also have to play it, and this card removes itself from the field, making your full field condition harder. Do you see how this is kind of a trap? You're going to have to pay 2 to play this 2-1 to get a +2. Doesn't seem worth it, especially when the selection of the top check 5, adding those 2 cards to hand, is not that great. So, because that's where we're at, it's still not a bad combo by any means. I think this combo is fine when you're comparing it to the other Dal Segno ones, definitely is. But the other big thing is there's no reward for ever fielding multiples of this card. If you have to play it on another one later, it's just like, oh, like I drew this and now I have to mill into my deck. It sucks. Like, you really ruin your deck state because you're trying to look for 2, right? Because you want to you can stop at 1 because it's up to 2, but like, you really don't want to. Like, you're hurting so hard for hand. Any way that you can get anything, even if they're completely useless cards, because you can, of course, use the hand on core to keep your things that you have around. It just feels really bad later on in the game. You're really not rewarded for keeping the card around as much as you think. But it is fine. And if the meta does change, playing this does open up some deck building options. And it is, of course, more memory if you decide to play the Bonder, even though it's a little expensive. So I definitely think it's a super valid option. I've done the most testing with this and the next combo we'll talk about. This is also an Ame, so this is the one that I settled on. This is the one that I believe is best in positioned in the meta right now. Doesn't seem like it's the best combo, however, I'll get into it. So it's a 1-1, 5k. And as long as you have a card in memory, it's a 6-5. So basically a free 1-1, 6-5. And then on climax play, you choose this and another character, and they both get on attack, reveal top. If it's a Kazanashima character, add it to hand, just straight up. And then if you think about it, we're running book and we're running choice. Those are technically 8+ing triggers. So no matter what, you'll get at least 1 card. Hopefully 2, because this is one of the only combos in Dal Segno, probably the only combo in Dal Segno, that incentivizes you in any way to field multiples of this card. You play down 2 of these in front of the hand on core support, you get 4 cards back, and you don't even care if they're junk, because you just throw them again, because this card is a 1-1-6-5, still gets over that 8k threshold. So a 1-1-6-5 versus a 2-1-7k, there's not much of a meaningful power threshold difference there. Out, because at level 1, if you're talking about backup power, you really want to get to 8k or higher. So we get there with just this, so there's no real difference there. It's still easily defendable. And the other thing is it doesn't have a field condition. There's just no field condition. You just play it, you pick this in another character, and you get a card. And that is really all this deck was ever looking for, the way it plays out. We're so focused on just sort of getting there, getting through the game, and making sure we can play our hat. This was by and far, it was an instant. The second I tried this combo, I knew it was the combo for the deck. It was very, very obvious. It has the best synergy. Book's not great. It's not the best trigger, but it is a plus. And this is, again, unlike the 2-1 Ame that forces you to mill into your new deck. This card actually really does incentivize you to keep it around, because for every book you draw, if you happen to rip into a book at some point, because you know it's going to happen, we draw climaxes even on 1 card. That is a thing. You're rewarded because for every single one you play, you get 2 cards, and you can keep this card around. This is a better card than most of the other cards in your deck. If it's not a memory generator, you have no reason to not pitch a card to keep this. So it doesn't really matter what cards you add, because of the hand on core, we're going to keep this around. We're going to keep comboing, and it definitely keeps up throughout the game better than any other combo by a significant margin. This is definitely the play for the meta right now. If the meta changes a little bit, the 2-1 could possibly become better, but it would have to be a massive metagame change for it to be truly relevant. Moving on to our level 2, again, we want to do something meaningful in level 2 game, and I also have some counters on here I'll briefly talk about. We have the Ame early play. She's a 4 or more on field early play, which is really good for our deck because we can't truly have perfect control of our deck state. Sometimes we'll, especially as a memory deck, we get a lot of memory on first deck, which this deck typically does, generates memory extremely quickly. We might triple cancel going into our level 2, and it's good that we're still able to play this because it's also a healer. And it's also a Shimikai effect, which can get our 1/1s, or also this 2/1 down here next to it, which we'll talk about in a second, over other things constantly. And then, of course, it can be in front of the hand, of course. Pretty good. This 2/1 Ame is an early play killer, but not in the traditional way. You have to have 2 or more memory, and she gains 2,000 power for every level in her battle opponent. So that's a really cool effect. She also has another effect. Talk about her. I have this whole slide dedicated to her. Obviously, stars noting here, cards that choose to play, cards that were important. They also have a normal waiting room sack anti-change counter, which means you have to pay 3 and sack a character overall. Even at that cost, you'll do it when it's game winning. However, we just don't have the stock overhead to be able to play it. So kind of unfortunate. So even though that also has funny art with the chocolate banana, we can unfortunately not squeeze the card into the deck in any of my testing. We were not able to even find a place for it. And then the 2 traditional counters. We have the 1/0 costless Himari counter, which is just a 2k costless counter. It's also yellow. Very important, helping us fix for yellow. Again, that's pretty hard. And then the 1/1 counter, which is as long as you have 2 or more memory, it's a 3k 1/1 counter. And because it has a soul trigger, we can salvage it with choice, which is really important. And you'll see in pretty much all of my lists, I split these 1 and 1 because 2 backups is sort of where we're at, sort of what we wanted to play. However, the fact that we can grab one off choice and then also have one that we can search from deck if we're just looking for a backup are both really great options. Also, one being costed if you trigger last or something like that. You trigger a choice last. Come on, no brainer. Grab this, play that one, especially if you're about to go over refresh. Really good interaction. Costed soul counters. That's why you see a lot of decks with choice now, especially like Madoka and stuff like that. They opt to run, instead of costless counters, they're running the Leafa counters that have the soul trigger so that they can always make sure they grab them when they trigger choice. Really important interaction to keep in mind. Moving into specific cards, I already talked about the effect on the Himari early play, or Ame early play. I don't know what I keep saying. The Ame early play here, she does sit small, but we don't really care because we have the hand-on court support. We will happily pitch cards, especially if we draw additional books, to keep this card around, make sure we keep up our 2-soul beater, make sure we're keeping up the damage race so we don't have to 2-turn opponent unless we truly do. We really don't get there if they're canceling early. It also has the Shimikai effect, like I said, very good. It's a better in this deck than you'd think because we have those 1/1s or 2/1s hanging around, so because they're a larger base power, we can actually get over some of our opponent's level 2s, maybe standby 1/1s, things like that. We can actually threaten to get over those cards in the mid-game. I want to talk about this card more in depth as well. This is the 2/1 Ame. I talked about the early play killer. 2+ in memory, 2k times the level of the opponent. So this is a card that's actually good against 2/2 standby targets if you have a read on your opponent being out their counters, or if you want to force them to use a counter, because again, you're going to have this in front of a hand-on court support. So the fact that if your opponent is spamming early plays, your opponent has standby, they're canceling, they're having an ascend level 2, you can keep this around, keep pitching cards. Again, every single extra card we have, we want to keep these 2/1s on board, because for every one of these level 2 or higher characters we kill, on reverse, we can choose it to pay 1 and draw a card. So it even lets us get some pluses when we're handing it around. We can sort of keep itself around in front of the hand-on court support, which is a pretty cool interaction, especially if you trigger choice. You take that extra stock, turn it immediately into a plus during that same battle phase, either immediately paying out the choice or making it easier to pay out on the following turn. Just turning that stock plus immediately into a raw plus. Very good. But yeah, just a great card. The fact that it can get power no matter what is in front of it, unlike a normal early play killer, and still hitting that 13k damage threshold against actual level 3s, just makes it a great card, especially in front of the hand-on court support. Moving on to auxiliary level 3s. So these are level 3s that are not our finisher, things that help our game plan at level 3, do things like dig us into climaxes, have sort of crazy effects and things like that. Going into them left to right, we have the old Noari, which is on reverse of your opponent. You You mill the top card of your deck, and if it has a soul trigger, it restands for free. Pretty scary effect. Also gets 500 power for each of your other Kazanashimas on board. There's also this new one, this Noari, which is a pay 1 on play stock swap, and it also can give a character 2,500 power on play. So a wall buster and also a stock swap. Pretty good toolboxing card for answering either large walls or being a general out stock compression. You usually have enough red in most decks to splash it. So important card for any competent deck to have access to, because stock compression, stock swap's a very powerful tool when used correctly. The EO, I have a whole slide dedicated to it. We're going to get into it. It is a draw 2, ditch 2, stock top, and it also is a pay 2 bounce any character on your opponent's board. Very important for a strategy. And then there's also this Himari, which is on play. You top check 6, put 3 back, and then it gains 1,000 power for every other character you play on the turn. Then, like, on attack, you reveal top, and if it's a character, you can pay 2 and heal. It used to be a really important card for making sure that this Nori restander went off, sort of like making the cost that you had to field this card in another lane to set up your Nori, if you sort of see where I'm going with that. But it unfortunately doesn't really have a place in the current list because that whole Nori restander engine unfortunately does not work well with the hack combo. The way the hack combo has to be played down, the way you have to attack, just is not conducive to the new finishing board with the hand on course support and things like that. There's also this event, a 3-2 event. You shuffle up to 5 cards from your waiting room into your deck that aren't climaxes, and then you burn for the number of climaxes, give something 4,000 power. I thought it was really funny. I gave it a brief try, played a couple games with it. You just don't have the stock overhead to play a card like this, funny as it is. Okay, so the EO, I talked about it before. This is one of the only ways in Kazanashima-only decks to rip into our choice. Even though it is not a true cantrip, it does not replace itself as a hand because of a draw 2, ditch 2, stock top. The fact that it is stock light, it plays for 1 and looks at 2 more cards, is far more important for us because our Himari, our hat finisher, does not require hand. It just requires us to fill our board and have 1 stock floating before we go into our attacks. Like I said, the Nori stock swap is another option. Having an out to stock compression scenarios is very important. But even in your best games, even in my sackiest games that I played with the deck, you have trouble justifying fielding this, especially when you could just 2-turn your opponent with hat. 2-turning your opponent with hat is far more effective, even if they are super compressed, because of the way the cancel burns work. For every cancel they initially get, they lower the chances of them being able to cancel the coming in burn 2s. And in those games where you are high rolling and you do have that extra stock overhead, you would much more often use that 2 stock to, instead of playing that Nori, play the EO and use her bounce ability. For 3 stock total, you bounce the lane that the hat will attack into first, ensuring that first cancel, making sure that first fail case doesn't occur. So very, very important card for the Dal Segno list. One of the most important. I don't see a lot of lists running it, and I don't know why. I think this card is 100% necessary in playing the deck to make sure you can get into the choice, because that is all you do the second you hit level 3, is just more Himaris, and more choices. And this is one of your only ways to get into more. Okay, so looking at the overall deck list, I'm going to start with Pants Choice. Running the new 2-1 Ame, because that is what most people have been gravitating to. Like I said, we sort of talked about this as I got through it, a whole thing here. We got our 4 spawner center runners, 4 Hazukis, 4 EOs that go to memory when they become reversed, 4 memory drop searchers, 3 Rickies, again, that loses relevance sort of later on in the game. We can't really want to field it because it has that Force Mill 2 on play. And then just 2 of the new EO Brainstormer. It's 500 power to center. Good synergy with both of the combos that we've settled on, either the 2-1 or the 1-1, giving them some extra power when they're set in the center lane, is relevant all throughout the game. And it is a search Brainstorm, unfortunately not salvage like DS would have preferred, but we work with what we can get as the only self-rest Brainstorm in the set worth playing. Moving into our level 1, 3 of the EO Spawner. Like I said, extremely, extremely important card. I've seen lists run this up to 4, and I think that's great. I think this card is extremely strong for the deck. And if you're going to play mono Dal Segno, you need to be running this card. 2 hand on course support. We only need to see 1. We have a lot of ways to search and sculpt, so we're only going to run 2. It's been super consistent. Never failed to get this card in all of my, at this point, 40, 50, 60 testing games. 2 backups, like I said, also easy to get these into our hand. Only 2, splitting it for the ability to possibly get the one with choice. That interaction has felt so good that I might consider going to only the 1/1 and cutting the costless, but at this point the 1 extra yellow has been slightly significant in a couple of games, so we're keeping it at a 1/1 split for now. 2 of the Ame that kills our opponent's level 3s. We want to make sure we have one of these down in front of our hand on core support as the game goes on. 4 of the 2/1 Ame with none of the bonder. Like I said, the deck bonder, the memory bonder is a little bit of a trap. With 4 copies, you can easily make sure you get one with all of your filter and search. There's no reason to waste slots on the bonder, but it's not so much the slots we're worried about the stock. You only really want to pay 1, because the big thing with the Ame drop search for getting this, as opposed to the Ame bonder, is the Ame drop search attacks and pays for her own stock cost. Into level 3s, 4 hats. Obviously, this is like the core of the deck. Obviously, we're going to run 4 of our finisher, also a healer. 2 of the EO, draw 2, ditch 2 stock, 1 bouncer, and then 2 of the Himari, 2 of the Ame, early play healer. So we have 6 heals and 2 digs / 1 cost level 3 beaters, kind of, also bouncers. And then I also have a quote-unquote sideboard over here. I didn't talk about this Hazuki. We talked about the Nori already. This Hazuki is a I guess I briefly mentioned it. It's a backward support card, 500 power to Kazanashima Anniversary in front, and then you can rest it and give one of your characters on reverse. You clock swap that character, so it's like as if you clock bombed it, which is really good for removing our opponents on reverse memory generating cards so they don't get their effect, because going to memory is part of the cost of the effect. Your opponent cannot fulfill that cost because the card is not on the board. So just keep that in mind. You can sort of squeeze this in. You can even get as greedy as running one of those and 1 brainstormer. So they sort of fulfill the same back row slot. You have to have the hand on core support down. Some people have tried cutting the hand on core support to like play the Hazuki in the same slot. Unfortunately, it doesn't work really well because DS mono really crutches on having these hand on core and these 2/1s and 1/1s. But yeah, moving into what I think is the better deck for the meta right now, the book choice deck list. Basically the exact same level 0 lineup, and all we did was move the 2/1s to the 1/1 and change the climax. Plays, like I said, talked about it throughout the whole video. This plays the best into the current JP field. Very strong interaction, makes it or not very strong enough to feasibly get us to Himari every single game at the end game, and just gives us the hand overhead to actually maybe use the extra turn we scum from our memory with our cancels at level 2 in a far more effective way, and that alone makes it just a better choice right now. If you can actually get some reverses at some point in a metagame, you only need 1 for the 2/1 Ame, and I think that's fine. But the full field condition also sucks, so I'll be playing the 1/1. I don't know about you guys. It's felt really great. So, cards that didn't make it. Cards that didn't make the cut. But they're still good ones. Just going to run through these pretty quickly here. We've been here a pretty long time. So, duplicative, unneeded cards. We don't need to run more Ricky, so we're not running the hat. We don't need a main phase drop search that much because we have the memory drop search. So, duplicative cards. Unfortunately, we could not fit the Paradise system. The stock cost is a bit weird, and they eat way too many slots because there are events. Even when you have the Bonder, you can't really run light counts of these cards. You are more so building your entire strategy around resolving these events, where some of them rip cards out of your deck, some of them can like refund themselves, and they do eventually turn into a plus. Other ones like scry you for cards or like rip through your deck. But just way too awkward, way too many slots. We don't have the space for it for what we're trying to do, which is resolve hat every game. If we were trying to do something else, maybe incidentally resolving a hat, 1 hat, maybe we could do something like that, and that's something I've been working with, but not the focus of this specific video. Green, these good green cards, this whole green package where you play the early play Hazuki and she heals you from your hand. Green doesn't plus, so we can't play these cards. That's literally it. Like, having a bunch of green in the deck does nothing for us. This memory interaction is super cute, but I think it was realized much better since Hazuki also has Setokai trait in Setokai focus builds, since you can like actually reasonably pay for the cost. Like, you can do things where like choosing to run Stock Soul with the Rika and things like that to make sure you can get these out. Unfortunately, didn't pan out for this build of Dal Segno, but I'm still messing with it. Those green cards are good, but they just didn't fit in this build. Too stock intensive. The Nori back row, notably one of the only ways to salvage in Mono Dal Segno. It's pay to tap it, grab a character of your memory, number of memory or lower to hand. So a repeatable plus engine. Pay 2 is really heavy. We can't afford to do that every turn because we need to pay 1 to play our advantage combos. And I tried this even without an advantage combo, just sort of using the EO spawner to sort of maybe play like empty door and do things like that, and even that didn't work out. It was just too stock intensive. Same thing for horror. We can't really play money counter in this deck because we go down to nothing after hat, and then we pitch our hand to hat again. So that's the game plan. So horror doesn't really work here. All these Ame cards that give cross-turn power on climax placement and they pop back, or on the 1/1, the 1/0 gives it on play, they just weren't worth it over having backups in the deck and having more filter cards to get those backups. They didn't keep up hand as well as they do in some other decks, because you think like they do have synergy with the Ame that needs the full field, because like you play it and your hand goes down and then they pop back to hand and they give the Ame cross-turn power and keeps it alive, and that sounds great until these cards start cutting into your filter cards. The EO spawner was just always better than these in any way, so unfortunately they weren't worth it. Cards that were good but way too cute to play were this Himari that's on play, top check 2, rearrange, and gains 1,000 power when other cards are put down on the field up to twice. Swings in at 3/5. Tried it as my level 0 slot, but it was just a cute effect. It was more of a confirmation bias thing. It didn't really influence my plays that much, since you reveal during battle phase so much. Knowing the top 2 isn't that important. You can get similar effects by like crashing an EO and then sequencing your effects in a different way so that they're most favorable. Same kind of thing with Creek. Creek's incredibly powerful. It's draw 2, put 2 back on top of your deck. Really strong effect, but just like not the kind of deck for it. You really have to build a whole deck around Creek to make it work as great as it is, because it's not a true plus. It doesn't plus you like Magic Brainstorm. It is a minus on play, unless you can do something with the cards that go back. And like I said previously, even with this new card that allows you during battle phase to sort of set the card that you mill to increase the chance for the Nori restand to go off, these just don't work with the hat finishing board. The way the hat finishing board plays out, it's just completely non-functional. I know people were running numbers in the pre-release phase of how to possibly get this restand and the burn so that we can like increase the chances that the Himari kicks, and that's like a really cute idea. But even in like my extensive testing with this, it just doesn't function. This was cut out pretty early in the pre-release phase, just sort of simulating the testing boards and how things would play out and get there, and it just doesn't work. Even in the most ideal, fully simulated scenarios, was not functional with the hat finishing board in every way, which is unfortunate, but it is good. I would like to like mess with a deck that does this at its primary top end, since it's like climaxless, where we sort of go for these sort of finishing effects and maybe focus more on healing with the rest of our level 3s, and this is like a small finishing package, maybe something in green, maybe something with that stock charge, but it doesn't fit with the hat. So, reflecting things that I've learned during this building process, Dal Segno. Having to pay for your mid-game combo is absolutely terrible. All of them need to be paid for that generate a plus, and it sucks no matter what. I talked a lot about the Ame, and that's because that Ame 1/1 was just so much less sucky when things didn't go your way than the other ones, because when things don't go your way with the ones where you have to like pay more for less up front, we're just because like with the Ame, you pay the one up front and you just get the ability to maybe plus on attack. Your opponent can't really deny it, and when things went wrong or your opponent like smartly did literally anything to stop you from doing it, paying for your combo is just absolutely garbage. So yeah, pretty obvious, but you know, just wanted to reiterate that. Generalized hand-on-core support is very strong. I don't know why Bushiroad continues to print these effects. They enable some of the most disgusting, degenerate stuff, and I would call hand-on-coring hats and playing Climax combo again for 2 turns degenerate. It's so dumb. I don't know why they keep printing them, but I'm sure as hell going to use them. Another thing, another obvious one, strong single tools like the 3/2 hat and the 0/0 Hazuki are not enough to put together a whole meta breaker deck on their own. Dal Segno always had problems. It was always going to have problems. But you can't just take that one thing and say, oh, this one card, this one thing, these one, two things, it's got memory and it's got hat. It's going to be great. It's not. It's not going to be great. It's always going to have problems. That mid game is just almost too much of a sort of hurdle to really overcome. Another thing, sort of a note, another kind of obvious one, but I guess they kind of all are. But giving up the idea of building a sort of all-rounder good stuff deck, trying to build like the best deck, like the best Dal deck, the best things like that. That's why I have Dal in here. And not every set's going to be Dal. What you should instead do as you're going through the brewing process is accentuate those unique things that you found in the pre-release phase, those things that this set, those unique things that this set does strong. Try to accentuate those, like the EO spawner, the 1/0 EO spawner, and the 3/2 EO bouncer. Those are cards that you look at them otherwise and you think, oh, these aren't that great. But like when you consider them, how they enable the things the set is strong at, like the hand-on core and like the just the ability to sort of like rip into additional climax, things like that, how reliant you are on getting that climax in your hand, very important. And lastly, I have to mention this. I should have just bought an anniversary playset if I wanted to play Himari Finisher. It plays hat better. It answers the current meta better. It's not reliant on sort of these really dated mid-game plussing combos. And yeah, that was just a far better option. But you know what? Sometimes you learn a lot. Sometimes you come out with a really cool deck. I will have to say that like Book Choice and Pan Choice have been incredibly fun to play. They haven't been great and sort of like this isn't a meta breaker. You're not going to see this top tournaments and stuff like that. But it's very fun. It's very unique. It doesn't always have to be a super meta deck. Sometimes it's just be a good enough. It's definitely a great playable deck. It's definitely fun. Definitely learned a lot. But if I wanted to like sort of play this card in a meta deck, should have bought Anniversary. And yeah, that's it. I know this has been a long one, but it's truly kind of like a deep dive. I hope you guys probably like Ame here. You're passed out in the field sort of after this long video. But I just want to thank you guys for sticking with me. This is something I wanted to do for a while, and Dal Segno coming out sort of gave me the opportunity to do it. So I thank you for always tuning into our content. Have all these links that we always have up on all our videos. Card Games, Discord, Competitive, White Schwartz, Discord, PGH. White Schwartz does not own or operate these Discords or any of these resources, but we do hang out here and we do rely on them both as players and as community members. We share our content there and love talking with everybody there, including you guys. There's also the Facebook groups, the White Schwartz Global Community and the White Schwartz NA Community. Both are primarily buy-sell trade groups, but if you're looking for those spoilers, that spoiler season I talk about, make sure you're on Global, where we get translations for those posted every day, and those translations are also immediately posted to the Discord, so you can get that stuff everywhere. And then I also have Twitters for not only myself, I tweet about YC all the time, but also our recurring cast of members here at PGH White Schwartz, so make sure you guys check that out. And with that, I think we're done, finally. Pittsburgh White Schwartz signing off. We'll see you guys in the next video.